everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Wells. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a great one for you as always. And we started at the top with some pretty big and important breaking news today. Supreme Court is making a pretty big ruling, pretty big decision on this mifepristone pill. They have said, okay, we're holding it in place. We're just going to preserve the status quo, let things kind of stay where they are for now. Meanwhile, we're also going to be talking today about this leaked Pentagon document showing how the Ukraine war is bleeding into the Middle East. Very disturbing story. And specifically more on that leaker. Has anyone really noticed how journalists were so vociferous in hunting this guy down and really trying to make sure that he was named and really shamed? Well, that was something that was noticed in The Intercept. Nikita Mazarov has a great story on just how crazy it is, the journalistic reaction to the leaker. And Marianne Mania is back in full effect, at least on TikTok, where the presidential candidate, self-help author, combining a little bit of Bernie Sanders policies with Jordan Peterson's self-help ethics to really get a pretty broad and interesting following on TikTok. We'll see if it will carry over, though. It's going to be a great show. Thank you so much for joining us. No place, no spot, no microphone I'd rather be talking to in my Friday night into Saturday morning. So, absolute pleasure to be doing the show here today. All right, so we're starting at the Supreme Court. So obviously, this is the mifepristone, this big abortion pill that was really used in a very wide percentage of abortions. So Samuel Alito issued an order Friday temporarily ensuring the common abortion pill would remain widely available to the Supreme Court, while the Supreme Court considered whether to grant the Biden administration's emergency request to preserve the FDA approval of the drug. The order was meant to maintain the status quo while the justices studied the brief, so pretty much a kind of hold in place. We're just going to keep things exactly the way they are while we review this case. This is how it's going to hold. He said a pretty brisk schedule for the court's consideration of the case. His order, an administrative say, instructed the groups challenging the FDA's approval of the abortion drug mifepristone to file their brief Tuesday at noon. So he's saying this is not going to be on hold for a long time. We do want this addressed. We do want this looked at here. He being the guy that you just say hardcore, purely ideological conservative. Not really someone who's based on or who operates based on kind of a legal foundation or at least wants to operate on a consistent legal foundation. He wants to be an ideologically very conservative. It's pretty clear to see the way he would want to rule in this case. Also judging based off some of the history of John Roberts, you kind of look at a different story because this was a conservative side of the court, which is now majority. It's a 5-4 majority with John Roberts' 6-3 majority. But on the issue of abortion, we saw really kind of at least a reported kind of schism between Roberts and the conservatives to say this real debate about how far do we want to go? Do we want to just keep attacking abortion by just canceling out and getting rid of everything except for Roe v. Wade, or do we just want to go for the whole thing? There was a long time where people really thought, it would one of those people being John Roberts, that it would be a bad idea and absolutely tank the court's legitimacy if we were able to do this. If we went ahead with this ruling, that's what they thought. They thought they would be absolutely in a really kind of poor position. And of course, over the summer, they gave themselves a little bit of a trial, a pre-run, by leaking that news that they were going to do it early just to see how people would react. And then when people were largely, just donate more money to Democrats, they thought, you know what, it's fine. So that is the question, is what is the calculations about this? Because John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Alito, to a lesser extent, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, those are four, and Coney Barrett as well. Those are 5 ideological, hardcore conservatives. And on the other side, you got Roberts. The ideological conservatives, they just want conservative things to happen because they're conservative. That's what they believe. They've gone through all the steps. They went to the right law schools. They've joined the right societies, et cetera, et cetera. They are through and through, dyed-in-the-wool conservatives. Nothing really is going to change that. But on the other hand, you got obviously the liberals who are, ideologically liberal, they're going to support the more liberal causes. They're not, Marxists or whatever. They're still, even Ketanji Jackson, she was one of the people who wrote, upholding the Stephen Donziger case. So, she's not a, crazy left winger, who everyone should love, but it does. See, I think the deciding vote, the really interesting person to watch, I think, is John Roberts here, is does he make that same point? Does he say, oh, we don't have to do this, we've already gone farther enough, it's getting rid of this meat for Prestone will be too much? Or will he make the same bet? Will he make the same gamble as this case gets up to the court in very short time here, this meat for Prestone case, which really would be essentially nationwide abortion, just federally, really essentially amount to not a ban, but really make federal abortion access very, very tough. Even in states like Massachusetts, or New York, California, whatever. If they're like very hardcore blue states, if you're trying to get mifepristone for your abortion and it's federally struck down by the Supreme Court, your abortion is going to be a lot tougher. You're going to have to actually go into the clinic. And even states like Massachusetts, it's a very hard sell. You're still going to have to drive miles and miles to go to the clinic, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be easy. And this will really, really, I think, enrage some of this abortion mania, this blue voting abortion mania that we've seen take place. It played such a big role in the midterms in some of these kind of swing states like Michigan, even like Kansas, where we saw some pretty big wins there. That is going to probably take hold in some of these other states if mifepristone really gets under attack. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of calculations Roberts makes. The justice order was prompted by an emergency application filed Friday morning by the Biden administration asking for justices to intervene. The administration's brief asked the courts to pause parts of an appeal court ruling that had limited the availability of the pill, part of the most commonly used method for ending pregnancies in the United States. If allowed to take effect, the lower court's abortion would upend the regulatory regime for mifepristone with sweeping consequences for the drugs for the pharmaceutical industry, women who need access to the drug, and the FDA's ability to implement its statutory authority. I know, I love how they put the pharmaceutical companies' concerns first. In a second emergency application filed by Danco Laboratories, which makes the branded version of mifepristone, the company's lawyers said justices should defer to the FDA's scientific expertise in determining whether the drug was safe and effective. And on Wednesday night, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit issued a mixed decision, with most sweeping aspects of the decision from so this is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is kind of interesting because they're considered broadly to be the most by far the most conservative court, the Fifth Circuit. They issued a mixed decision staying the most sweeping aspects of the decision from Matthew Kaczmarek. So they essentially agreed with him that would have wholly overridden FDA approval of the pill after more than 2 decades. But the appeals court, in an unsigned order from a divided 3-judge panel, temporarily let stand the other aspects of Judge Kaczmarek's ruling, including by requiring in-person visits with doctors, rolling back the availability of pills from the first 10 weeks of pregnancy to 7 weeks, and barring dispensing them by mail. So essentially right now it is on hold, and decision comes down to the Supreme Court. So kind of give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect from that. Let's go on to our next story.
This ain't what you want. Project. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want.
You're listening to Newsflash right here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Help us grow our audience. Subscribe, rate, and review our show on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Thank you very much. All right, let's get on to our next story today. And it is a very interesting one. It's, I gave them a little bit of a break when they first came out, but if I had gone to The Intercept in this late date, 2 or 3, 4 days after the documents really came out, and there was no stories about the documents up, these leaked documents up on The Intercept, they're literally called the frickin' Intercept. This is their bread and butter. I'd be very disappointed. I'd be like, well, what the hell is happening to them? But luckily, there were like 3 or 4 of them three or four coming at it from 3 or 4 different angles. So we'll get to another one of those stories in just a second. But again, here in The Intercept, Ken Klipstein, Murtaza Hussain on this one, and really, we go to them because it's really the only place you could find quality reporting on the underreported parts of these documents. A lot of people are just like, oh, the leaker is bad. The leaker is out there. We have to find the leaker. Oh, we found the leaker. Joe Biden arrested the leaker. He was living in his mom's house as an Air National Guardsman in Cape Cod. So it's essentially what happened. But in these documents, it kind of does explain a cache of highly classified U.S. intelligence reports sheds light on the growing risk of U.S. conflict with Iran, as well as apparent Israeli efforts to directly involve the U.S. in operations targeting Iranian interests in the Middle East. The documents expose the sensitivity of the geopolitical situation and how tensions between Russia and Israel could escalate dramatically in the context of Russia's war in Ukraine. The set of classified documents is reported to have been shared online in a gaming forum, and police arrested the 21-year-old U.S. Air Force National Guardsman Jack Teixeira on Thursday, on suspicion of involvement in the leak. A briefing document dated February 28th, marked top secret and prepared by the Defense Intelligence Agency, details 4 scenarios it considers possible under which Israel could provide lethal aid to Ukraine, something that Washington sought, but Israel, which has ties to Russia, has refused to do. On one possible scenario, the briefing says, Russia continues to allow Iranian advanced conventional weapons through Syria, prompting Israel to request expanded U.S. support for Israel counter Iran activities in exchange for lethal aid to Ukraine, as Israel accused Iran of transferring military equipment into Syrian territory that could be used against Israel in a future conflict. So they're saying, Israel is going to want our help dealing with that. The document also provides background to the scenario, which appears to refer to current circumstances that could set the stage for such a situation. Israel defense leaders are advocating for increased risk-taking to counter Iran, including proposing bilateral U.S.-Israeli operations. Both countries have been engaging in high-profile military drills as tensions in the region have risen. This January, the U.S. and Israel conducted their largest joint military exercise in history, an exercise that reportedly simulated airstrikes on Iranian nuclear cities. On Iranian nuclear sites. So they're desperate to stop Iran getting the thing that they both have, which is a nuke, we in Israel. Another plausible scenario, according to the briefing, is that Russia incurs casualties from a periodic Israeli strike in Syria and directly targets Israeli aircraft with the help of Iran. Now, that would be interesting. The document also reports that Israel has regularly requested overflight support from the U.S. to carry out strikes against Iranian interests in Syria. The same document provides a laundry list of Israeli weapons. Now, it might be transferred to the Ukrainians in the quid pro quo that the U.S. is pushing for, such as Israeli-built surface-to-air missiles and anti-tank systems. Such lethal aid might be transferred by Israel, with the document notes, under increased U.S. pressure or perceived degradation in its ties to Russia. The National Security Council declined to comment on the document detailing Israel's scenario specifically. Since U.S. withdrawal from the Iranian nuclear deal under the Trump administration, the U.S. has been on a collision course with the Iranian government over its nuclear energy and ballistic missile program. Documents from the cache also shed light on other U.S. surveillance efforts focused on Iran. So, it really does kind of show how these documents that were released have been really clear that they're not just putting on Ukraine. They're really pushing into a bunch of other issues. This guy seemed to be interested in taking anything that he could find and just going for it. One document states that according to a signals and intelligence report and imagery analysis, the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had made plans to launch a missile equipped with a communication satellite known as the Nahid-1 in early March. Another report on discussions between 2 Iranian officials, a spokesperson for Iran's nuclear program named Behrouz Kamalvandi and Iranian Vice President for Political Affairs Mohammad Jamshidi, outlining their strategy for handling an expected visit by the IAEA chief Rafael Grossi in Iran to March. The document quoted Kamalvandi saying that Grossi was prepared to defuse the situation related to a forthcoming IAEA report on Iranian nuclear activities, adding that Jamshidi had tasked Kamalvandi with coming up with talking points that could be conveyed to the media, thereby mitigating any negative effects from the IAEA report. A report from the IAEA which is the kind of global nuclear watchdog, found that the IAEA inspectors have found uranium particles enriched up to 83.7% at an Iranian nuclear site. The level of uranium enrichment considered sufficient for building a nuclear weapon is 90%, though the report suggests the enrichment discovered at the Fordo nuclear plant may have been an incidental fluctuation rather than a sign of future weaponization. And again, first things first, Iran having a nuclear weapon would be unequivocally a bad thing. Like that, any country with more nukes is not something that you want to see in the world. But the fact of the matter is here, the United States, through, it's so interesting that it was like all of a sudden, now that Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, we can't even possibly try to get back with the Iranians now. Like, it's just impossible. Any type of peace, any type of diplomacy is, just impossible. Well, how convenient is that, right? How convenient is, looking at the situation that, Obama resolved, Trump right away blew up, and Biden essentially just stood by and let it continue to fall apart when he, early in his administration, absolutely had the opportunity to get closer to Iran, give Iran breaks on sanctions in exchange for, at least re-entering some sort of deal, putting some sort of pressure on Iran to actually get to a better spot, but they just systematically have not seemed interested in that, only, breaking the deal. The United States broke the deal. No ifs, ands, buts, no way around that, just a fact. And now here they are, essentially just doing and just ratcheting things up. And now all of a sudden they're surprised when Iran ratchets things up. So Joe Biden failed to revive it. The U.S. has signed, referring to the deal here, the U.S. has signed off a hawkish approach to Iran, prominently championed by some Israeli political figures, including current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has spent years campaigning to take a harder against a nuclear agreement. That's pretty much really why he turned on Obama, was Obama did this deal, actually trying to create peace in the region, unlike what Israel is wanting to do, and the United States, by the way, it's important to say. And it is, it's very, very clear. It's very, very clear that this does not seem to be going away at any time soon. It's very, very important, and it really just shows you why these documents being leaked is so important and so beneficial. It's the fact that we would not know about this if it hadn't been for this leaked documents. It's so important to see how, the inner workings of these governments, and especially the inner workings of our own governments, to know what wars and what conflicts we may be fighting in or entering in next. In the fallout from the Pentagon leaks, a troubling trend has emerged. Journalists seem to be eagerly volunteering their efforts to help the Pentagon and Justice Department facilitate an investigation into the source of the leaks with no discussion of the ethical ramifications. If the individual, whose identity has already been published by journalists and now has been arrested by federal authorities, had shared precisely the same classified materials with reporters, regardless of his motivations, he would be tirelessly defended as a source. NPR recently decried, which, frankly, I think the author here, Nikita Mazarov here in The Intercepts, gives a little bit too much credit to journalists. The fact that they would report, we saw like the Intercept, people like Glenn Greenwald, Ed Snowden. Those are the people who are going to be reporting on any of these documents. WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Those are the people. It's not. When is the last time our mainstream media received leaked documents, especially from the security state? I think it's different with other places. The journalists will gladly report on other leaked documents, even leaked government documents. But when it comes to the security state, 99% of American mainstream journalists, I can't think of one that would not want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Because it's so completely horrific, completely just stigmatized to say, oh, you're reporting on something that could threaten national security. You're putting one of our soldiers in danger, and you have this 10-ton brick of pressure coming on you, like we totally saw this week with anyone even reporting on, let alone the actual leaker. So I really don't think that A, that they would report on this, but even B, we saw an actual journalist, I guess, Glenn Greenwald, was the last major person to report on the Edward Snowden stuff. he was, look where he is now. He's no friend to the mainstream. That is for sure, whatever you think of the guy. And Julian Assange, he's in prison. Like the last time you go back to New York Times, Daniel Ellsberg, Pentagon papers in the 1960s. Like that is the only time you could really point to someone actively going and reporting things contrary to the interests of the state. So NPR recently decried being labeled by Twitter as state-affiliated media. And what I said at the time about this was, it's a little bit stupid. They're linked to the government through the public spending of the budget. It does not influence their programming, but they're established media in that way. They're technically all state media, because, and I think we saw another really great example of this this past week, which is when it comes down to it. Well, like normally, of course, everyone's allowed to have their freedom. Everyone's allowed to report, what they want to report, say what they want to say, even criticize the government, go after Biden. But when there's classified documents being leaked, when the government is in some way deeply or gravely embarrassed, it can be, like they were with these leaks. When national security interests need to be protected, you're not going to see any kind of dissent. You're not going to really see at all any kind of person, any mainstream media voice coming out and saying in any real way that they are, they stand with the leakers. They want to defend the leakers. They came out 100% with the same message. This guy's a traitor. This guy's leaked something that's not good. People are looking for him now, and they even repeated down the same line. Oh, we're not sure if all the documents are authentic. They may have been doctored, so don't be too sure about this, guys. Literally taking lines straight from probably, the emails they get from their friends at the Pentagon. And that is how it works. That is really true. When I say, all of our media is, when it comes down to it, is really state run, that is what I mean. When quote unquote national security interests come into play, things get really tightened up, really well organized, and kind of brought under control quite quick. And that's a great example of this. And we go through some of these examples here. So NPR is so mad about this state affiliated media designation. But that unrelated controversy is notable given that NPR staffers seem to have deputized themselves to act as government investigator by posting image analyses on Twitter. While NPR has announced that its official organization accounts have quit Twitter, individual staff accounts still appear to be active. NPR senior editor and correspondent Jeff Brumfield, on Monday combed through artifacts visible in the periphery of the photos of leaks, as well as collating findings others have discovered, itemizing and explaining each one. Though Brumfield claimed his roundup was largely pointless, we know he was effectively performing free labor for the Justice Department. I'm sure he was getting paid. I'm sure he was getting well paid. His post may corroborate the identity of a suspect. For instance, it may be possible for investigators to analyze a suspect's credit card purchase history to see if at some point ordered the objects in question. Brumfield did not respond to requests for comment at the time of the publication. The saving grace here appears to be the analysis. All is too often the case with open source sleuthing on social media. It was pretty flawed. Less than 15 minutes after proclaiming he was confident that a manual partially visible and when the photos of the leaked documents was for a particular model of scope, I guess isn't a gun or something. Others pointed out that the manual was clearly for a different model. To his credit, Brumfield does freely admit in his bio to being mostly stupid on Twitter, though he can do that at his own liberty as long as it doesn't put someone else's liberty in danger, which it seems to have done here. But make no mistake, this isn't free labor. This is his job. This is what he's there to do. This is what he's supposed to do. Like when you are needed as a journalist the most is these moments to come out with all your other journalistic friends and say, okay, this is what the narrative is. This is what happens here. We're gonna take the general consciousness in this direction, and that can be very big. That can be very, very influential. It's not atypical for government agencies to explicitly request this type of image identification help. For instance, Europol maintains a trace and object website where budding image analysis can help identify various objects in photos linked to child abuse cases. In the case of the leaked Pentagon documents, the Justice Department hasn't even needed to put out such a call, as plenty of volunteers, mostly journalists, no surprise, are offering up plenty of leads. Jake Godin, a visual investigative journalist at Scripps News, has likewise engaged in a Twitter pastime of volunteering to his time to help the Justice Department by doing these visual analyses. Bellingcat, meanwhile, went further and virtually handed over the potential origin point of the leak by specifying the exact name of the chat room where the documents appear to have first been shared. The fact that these identifications may be aiding the Justice Department investigation appears not to have been merited any public consideration from those doing the analysis. So, given what we know about Bellingcat, however, it does stand to reason that that may have been a bit of a, let's say, not as much of an independent analysis from the intelligence community as some may, or as it may have appeared. What I'm saying, folks, is that Bellingcat is a CIA front. On Wednesday, the Washington Post disclosed further information about peripheral contents of previously unreported images, as well as a variety. They're more interested in figuring out what's on the edges of the images. I think that this is really what it comes down to is here, like the peak journalist moment here is that the journalists in this country are just far, far more interested in figuring out what is on the edge of these documents, what like peripheral things they can identify to help catch the leaker. They're much more focused on that as opposed to actually helping and figuring out what is in the center of the photo of these documents, which is really, really important things that actually impact American national security and, what we're doing on the grounds. The kids may or may not be all right, but one thing is clear. They are super into Marianne Williamson. That's Ryan Grimm on TikTok. If engagement on TikTok is any indication, the Democratic presidential primary today, held among people under 50, was voted in a landslide for the best-selling author, now making her second bid for the nomination. Marianne Williamson has posted only 65 videos on TikTok, but has drawn more than 11 million views, according to a TikTok data counter. But there are also endless Marianne Stan accounts, which is pretty big on, because you have the main account, but where the real magic happens is the fan pages, the edits, the fan cams, all that kind of stuff. They're posting her speeches and rack up pretty massive numbers. Scroll through the popular account Real Democrat 20 turns up Williamson videos, all generating eye-popping numbers for her treatises on universal health care, corruption, gun rights, or abortion, including nearly 1 million views for, well, let's listen for ourselves here. Let's take a look. All right, so the caption says, Gen Z and millennials trying to stay alive out there, and then and then it's just Marianne. It just says Marianne Williamson running for president. And it literally leads you into just right from there. Just the algorithm is serving me.
Nobody believes in you.
Marianne
you lost
Williamson,
again and again and again.
TikToks.
The lights are cut off, but you still looking at your dreams, reviewing it every day and saying to yourself, it's not over until I win.
That's going to be hyped up for Marianne Williamson. Yeah, it's really cool. But a recent poll found Williamson hovering around 20% with voters under 30, far higher than she reached in the crowded 2020 field, suggesting the buzz on TikTok is translating into real support that is producing, really going beyond the buzz on TikTok. I am obsessed with it, says Jessica Burbank, leftist political TikTok star who posts as K.A. Burbank on TikTok. Some reasons for the support are obvious. Videos of her pledging to wipe out student debt and remove marijuana from Schedule 1 have predictably gone viral. But others that speak more holistically about the political system and the corruption that limits the ability, so the other videos that speak more holistically about the political system, the corruption that limits the ability of people to have their voices heard or their collective will translated into public policy have gone pretty viral as well. And the one that mentions student debt and weed also includes a pledge to beef up the National Labor Relations Board, cut all government contracts with union-busting companies, and otherwise do everything she can as president to boost up organized labor. The notion that Williamson, in her first run at the prize, second run at the prize, concedes a Democratic nomination may seem a bit far-fetched, but obviously so did Bernie as well back then. she'd probably be the longest shot in America, probably, to claim a major party nomination after John Davis' surprise win at the Democratic Convention of 1924. The same poll had Joe Biden up 73% to 10 over Williamson, though her support rises to 14% in battleground states. Still, there's much to be learned about our current politics by taking seriously the phenomenon of her surging youth support. Williamson realized something unusual was going on when her friends began reaching out to say that their kids were becoming fans of hers on the platform. All these people would text me and say, "My 17-year-old loves you. My 20 or 22-year-old wants to know if she can have your email." She said, "I don't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, 'Hello, TikTok star,' but obviously I'm grateful to see there is a platform, there's a venue where I've seen and the message is received." Well, yeah, certainly seems like the message is being received there, Marianne. And, a lot of people doubting the Marianne candidacy, not really talking too favorably or too seriously about it. Of course, I don't think it's likely that she's going to win. I don't think also that it's bad by any stretch of the imagination that she is running in this race. She's someone who has, in my opinion, very high morals, believes all the things I want a president to believe. And if she's out there campaigning, supporting socialist beliefs, I don't see why anyone would or should have a problem with that. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's show, and hope you join us back on Monday for our next episode. It's been Newsflash.